Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to see you. We've been friends for a long time, and so I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today and to be able to share this on social media.
I'm excited to be here. Thankful for all you guys do.
So Kelly, you and I have had a chance to talk about this over the last few years, but it feels like there's been a shift in education. I'm a parent. I have two young kids, and maybe it's just that I'm more attuned to it now that I am a parent and have kids in school. Um, but it feels like there's a shift. Whereas when I was in school, schools wanted parental involvement, right? They were constantly encouraging parents to be there on campus, involved in the classroom, understanding what's going on in the classroom, what's being taught. Um, Today, it feels very different. In fact, as you know, Center for American Liberty is handling a lot of lawsuits where we're challenging these parental secrecy policies where schools are actually keeping secrets from parents, right? That's I think actually the law right now in your home state of California and a growing number of other states across the country. But what I really want to kind of expose here is why. Like that's the I think the pertinent question. Like why are they keeping secrets? Why do they want to keep secrets? Like what are those influences that are creating this like new paradigm that as parents like we all have to live in and hopefully make better. And you have done an unbelievable amount of research, probably more than anyone I know, answering that question, why? Why is this all happening? So I would just love to hear your thoughts on why this is all happening.
I I really my heart goes out to these parents because it is a shift for all of us. And we went to school and I remember as a child, my both of my parents coming into class, teaching a class, being a guest and showing about their work, but volunteering a lot. And it's been a tremendous shift. So what's happened? Uh, in my opinion, what I've seen in my research is not just a broad shift of political agendas entering the classroom, but also in order for those political agendas to become fully integrated into the school system, they are removing the parents because oftentimes it is the parent, the adult, who has that typical capacity to understand everything that's going on and be able to have those safeguards for their child and be able to assess the situation and speak up. And so that removal, that erosion of parental rights and involvement is something broad because it really does challenge an agenda. And when education becomes an agenda, that agenda is easy to target impressionable children whose brains are still fully developing. But when the parents are there, they face an actual intellectual a challenge because the parents will address and assess the situation. So I've seen, sadly, in my state of California and across the country, and over the years, just a growing rhetoric from teachers' unions and activist organizations that seek to insert their agenda into the school system and actually change the child's value system.
That's really scary, right? As a parent, like again, now that I have kids in school, um, just feel like I have a different level of appreciation to what it means and like that element of safeguarding for my own kids, right? And so I remember when my oldest, when we were deciding, do we send her to public school? Do we send her to private school? Do we homeschool? Um, it really caused my wife and I to think through what values do we want to pass on to our kids, right? We're Christians. We want our Christian faith to be passed down to our children. We want to be able to share that with them as it's very much part of our family identity and our family heritage. And so, you know, we had to look for a school that would partner with us, not usurp us. And I think that that's happening a lot. And I think what you mentioned a moment ago about the values, right? To me, that seems to be at the crux of it, right? Where schools want to change the future by kind of like brainwashing kids today with new values, disassociating them from their parents. So my kind of like my question here is, I You and I talked a while ago about educational models, and in all transparency, this was a brand new conversation for me. I went to law school. I have no idea what any of these educational models are, what they mean, community education, like it's all foreign to me. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And so, could you take just a few minutes to kind of, as a refresher, even if just for my benefit, what those are and why those are significant today?
Yeah. So over the years, I was beginning to research social emotional learning, comprehensive sexuality education, which is partnered with gender ideology, ethnic studies, equitable math, all of these different subjects. But what I was noticing, particularly within comprehensive sexuality education, was this apparent correlation to what's called community schools. And community schools have existed for a long time, but I was curious, why do I keep seeing this correlation? And so, what is a community school? Today, they're known as the WISC model, which is an acronym. They only take part of the acronym WSCC, whole school, whole community, whole child. And ultimately, what the intended goals of full implementation of this model is designed to achieve is all government social services existing at the school site where all healthcare and all education are fused together for health equity and education equity. It is actually my chief concern in education because of the way in which it promotes healthcare separate from the family. And what I mean by that is they're building healthcare facilities or they're offering telehealth clinics or mobile clinic vans to students at the school without their parents present. And while it is marketed incredibly well as a means for dental and eye care, what's actually I'm seeing from my research is that sexual and reproductive care is actually at the forefront of this community school agenda. And in doing so, students are being brought into these school based health centers and they're regularly being asked at the school based health center about their sexual orientation, their gender identity and expression. They're being asked about pronouns, their sexual habits, and they're being introduced to topics that you might see in comprehensive sexuality education, that gender is a social construct, and all of these ideas that are promoted to them for every visit. And it's not a surprise to me that in researching this community school model, which really derives from a vast amount of history with a lot of involved parties, today's full service community school model was actually brought forth out of what I call the Planned Parenthood family tree because multiple organizations that originated there out of former staff there have then in turn helped develop not just the full service community school model, but then in turn also uh, the advancement of school based health centers and many of these services. So, what kind of services might parents want to be aware of? Some of the slides I got from a conference years ago indicate the offerings of sexuality and gender affirming care as they call it. I call it by another name. Um, and they include little graphic images of chest binders and little testosterone bottle. And it's very concerning because parents are unaware. And this fusion of healthcare is also happening in mental health through schools, where we're being told mental health support sounds so good. But in actuality, oftentimes, many of these health plans are also moving towards an introduction to gender ideology.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of gaslighting, to put it bluntly. You know, we represent a John and Jane Doe client in Colorado whose daughter was being um, provided licensed medical care, right? But it was psychological counseling through an LGBT resource center from a counselor who is trans identifying and whose practice is to help kids in their transitions, right? All without mom and dad knowing about it. And the only reason this mom and dad found out is because they found a receipt for a breast binder. And so, again, kind of going back, like when I was a kid, I remember we would go to the front office for like a hearing test. They would put them kind of like headphones like this on and say like, raise your hand every time you hear a beep. And then they would, anytime a kid in the school got lice, they would bring you to the front office and inspect everyone's scalp. That was kind of the extent of the medical care that's happening. But now, as we're seeing in Colorado, and I think we'll see in other states, to your point, they're providing a lot more, and it's under this facade, right? If someone is really in need for care, there are ways that care can be provided through existing services. I think, um, at a minimum, parents should be notified. I would think parents should be consenting to it as well, but at a minimum, they should be notified. That's not happening. Who's pushing this whole disassociation of parents from raising their kids?
In a big way, it's the teachers' unions. I remember seeing that in a teachers' union handbook from 2019, where the California Teachers Association was advocating for students to be able to access gender affirming healthcare, as they called it. But they stated, in quotes, without the barrier of parental permission. So that to me is telling as a parent myself, because that describes to me that the parent is seen or viewed as simply a barrier. And it's very much a similar rhetoric that we see of chosen family or family at school. This idea, one of the 10 facets of the community school model that exists today, which it states family engagement. And so again, it's a lovely marketed phrase, but how is this implemented? And oftentimes for school staff, that might mean simply your chosen family or your family at school to them. So teachers unions are a big part of this movement to advance these community schools across the country, and also to promote this concept of students making decisions about their health care separate from their parents, but also many of the abortion lobbying groups and activist groups are promoting this. Um, Sadly, they have a belief system that children are sexual at birth, and much of that curricula that we see even from uh, international organizations that promote comprehensive sexuality education. That curricula goes all the way down to little young preschool ages, where they're teaching some pretty explicit concepts to children. So being aware of this, oh, yeah, go ahead.
And they put it in like cartoons, right?
Yes.
Like it's like a way of diluting what it really is, diluting how inappropriate it really is for these kids because it's in like this caricature, this cartoon. Um, and from a legal perspective, like you also see some of some of the way the courts have handled like pornography, right? If it's not a reasonably identifiable person, and I may have the legal standard there just slightly off, then it usually doesn't classify. So if it's like cartoon, I think, and I probably need to do some more research maybe before we even publish this conversation. But it seems to me that if they put it in a cartoon, they can kind of get around some of the legal standards that would prevent that type of material from being in the classroom. But having cartoon images, and you and I, like we've known a lot of people who have been exposed, whose kids have been exposed to this stuff, and it seems very purposeful to like sexualize kids at a very, very young age.
Absolutely. And it reduces their natural boundaries and their natural sense of modesty. Um, it's an introduction of new ideas, often very explicit ideas. Like you said in the cartoons, when I'm talking whether it's somebody who works at a school and I'm talking to them about curricula, or I'm talking with parents, I ask them to put on the mindset of somebody who works in a company doing a marketing plan for the Super Bowl. And I ask them to pay attention to the narration, the tone, the words, the coordination of the words with the imagery, and pull out every detail. And when parents and the community at large, when they start to pay attention to the rhetoric, that power of persuasion that's found in these videos and the marketed messages, it's very concerning. There's one video in particular, um, and it's stated that it's a video about abstinence and virginity, but the narration and what the narrator says in correlation with the characters in the video and how those characters are portrayed is a lot of messages that can be gathered from that. So when you're 10 years old or younger, or maybe a little bit older, and your brain is not fully developed, but you're watching these videos, perhaps on your own at school or at home, you're not there to have a parent guide you with that maturity to say, hey, do you see that message that they're trying to portray? They're portraying this child, the religious child, in one way, and they're portraying the popular, more beautiful character this way, or the way that they said a very explicit term while the character did a certain behavior. All of those details, there's a huge amount of concerns I have. I remember reviewing a curricula for comprehensive sexuality education, and the high school version started with a character. And what that cartoon character is doing is simply introducing himself to the audience. But in doing so, he's holding up a portrait, and it's a topless blonde on a beach that he's painted. Again, all cartoon character. And then he tells the students the name of the painting, and it's explicit. And there's no educational value or merit to this. This is simply a means to promote certain ideas into a child's mind and get them accustomed to talking about saying these things. And it influences them. Like I said, it reduces their natural boundaries.
So, Kelly, over the summer, or I guess early on in the summer, the Supreme Court released its opinion in Mahmoud, a case coming out of Montgomery County, Maryland, my home state. And the court there upheld, or the court there ruled that parents have an opt out right, right? So if there's objectionable material, parents can opt their kids out. Now, to me, that presumes that parents know what's going on in the classroom. They have to be able to know it if they're going to opt out of it. Um, but how easy is that for parents to do? Because when I was a kid, it was like, there were a few weeks of health education. They sent a permission slip home. It wasn't things like this. It was like, hey, you should wear deodorant. You know what I mean? It was just very different. Now it seems like it's not just in your health education course. It seems a lot more rampant.
Yeah, it is. Um, it's finding its way into multiple topics. I've seen that these ideas in social and emotional learning and in science education, English class, um, these concepts, and even some of these videos that we were just talking about, the cartoon videos that are explicit, I've seen in ethnic studies curricula as well. So it's definitely a concept that is being moved into every area of study. And that is part of the goal, fully integrated into everything, very similar to social emotional learning, which is another concern I have. And social emotional learning is finding itself into um, playworks, I would say recess, and also sports and teacher staff work as well. So, anyways, I think what what is really important for parents to be aware of with opt-outs is that the school might not have a full plan in place when they receive your opt-out. So making sure that they receive your opt-out and acknowledge that receipt, and that you turn it in every single school year. I usually advise that parents ask the school who's going to be the adult supervision of your child. during the opt out time. And then, in addition to that, I also encourage parents to ask the school faculty and staff what is going to be the plan in place for the child when they're opted out, and how is the communication going to work with other school staff, aides, and also substitute teaching staff. Um, so I think the opt out, as wonderful it is as it is, it's also important for parents to hold the school accountable and to stay attentive to the ways in which it's implemented.
So, Kelly, what can parents do? Right? Like, I think one of the challenges is perhaps not knowing what questions to ask or to who to ask. So, what would you advise parents who just they want to, maybe they're working full time, both parents working full time, don't have time to do the um, deep dive into the research, but need to get to the crux of it because at the end of the day, they need to send their kids to school. Their kids need to be protected in school. So, what would you advise parents to? What are the questions you would advise parents to be asking their kids' school?
I would certainly want to ask the school, and usually this would fall under forming a good relationship with the school district's curriculum director and being able to ask, what curriculum are you using to comply with health education? If your state has a health education law, then in California, that would be the California Healthy Youth Act. But in other states, you could certainly ask, what curricula and supplemental curricula are you using to teach family life education or sex education? Um, but furthermore, I think it's really important for parents to be familiar with not just the curriculum that the school board has approved, but to ask teachers what types of supplemental curricula may be used, including videos, website resources, what games and activities might be played during sex education class, and ultimately to become familiar with just asking those questions, but also to anticipate. There are people at the school district that may or may not have all the answers, but also to anticipate that sometimes while there's so many wonderful people that do work in schools, I want to say that, there's also times when there might be a teacher that's trying to, or a staff member that may not want you to know things. So just to always be discerning and attentive to that. Um, to be diplomatic is important, but other questions to ask. I know we're at a period of time where there's lots of critical theories being implemented in schools, not just one. So, asking about various curricula and the perspectives that are being taught um, in the school system. And then, furthermore, I also think it's important for parents to just be able to regularly communicate with their children and to know their own rights and then encourage their child in the rights that they have. So, for example, in the situation of a school based health clinic, what schools are doing is they're having students go on tours at the school based health center, or they're also having students go with another student to the school based health center. And if a staff member recommends that to a child, I usually recommend that the parent consider, if they don't want their child there, just telling the staff in advance. And if a staff member tells them, say, I'm supposed to call my mom or my dad now, because they don't want me going there and I don't really want to go there. Being able to assert themselves is such an important skill. I can't emphasize enough how important the words no thank you or no are in today's culture and in today's school system, but it does need to be exercised at times. And so
Yeah, I think you made a really good point. You made a lot of really good points, first of all. But what really resonates is being very diplomatic, right? And not just assuming. I think there's on social media, there's such a culture of like everyone who is on the other side of the aisle. There's like this vilification, right? or if you work in a school system, you're the enemy. And I don't think that's true. My mom was a public school teacher for her whole career, and I went to public schools in Maryland, and there were a lot of wonderful people, a lot of wonderful educators that had a big impact on my life. But there were some that said some things that were inappropriate in the classroom, and we've certainly represented some parents and young people through the work of the Center for American Liberty through situations that should never happened in the classroom. So I think one of the things I always tell folks is if you put something in an email, anticipate that it's going to be read by a judge or a jury, right? Be very diplomatic, be very respectful. You can be direct, but you should always be very, very respectful. Anticipating again that someone outside of this immediate conversation is going to read it, and you don't want them to have just a terrible opinion of you to start before they hear any of your arguments. Kelly, this has been really, really enlightening for me. I think it's going to be very enlightening for all the folks who are watching it online. Is there anything else you would want to add in closing? Again, I want to thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all you do. I would like to add one thing. We're living in a time in society where it is really important to have courage. And just as on, it's perfect to talk about this after we had just talked about diplomacy and being respectful and considerate. And it's also so important to have courage. And for those that are out there that might be in a situation that they're even considering the possibility of legal action, one, to call Center for American Liberty. You guys are an amazing, amazing law firm, and we're so thankful. I am so thankful for you. And furthermore, I would like people to give and donate to the work you guys are doing because I already know how much you have helped people that I know, and you're helping so many others. And I would invite everybody listening to please join me in donating to Center for American Liberty because you guys are doing so much good.
Kelly, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.